San Bernardino. This panel examines the public and private sector collaborative model in environmental stewardship of Mary's Village, the first comprehensive center for homeless men in the central San Bernardino Valley. And I'm going to invite our panel up and then have our moderator take it away. So please have moderator Jill Anderson, if you would join us with Southern California Edison, the VP of Customer Programs and Service. Terry Kent, a BIA past president of Crestwood Communities. Ian Hammon-Hogan, program manager and co-founder of BIRA. And Jerine, Ahmed, senior engineer, Southern California Edison Emerging Products, our energy efficiency innovation case study. We'll take it away. And Jill, thank you so much for being here. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for having us. I'm Jill Anderson with Southern California Edison, and I want to start by letting each of our panelists introduce themselves, and then we're going to get started sharing this really exciting project.
Hi, I'm Ian Hammon-Hogan, project manager and co-founder of BIRA Energy. I specialize in building energy simulations, so I'll be the super nerd trying to keep things a little bit relevant right here today.
That's great. Terry?
Thank you for having me. My name is Terry Kent. I'm the owner of Crestwood Communities, fourth generation home builder here in Southern California. And my company and family has joined on with Mary's Village to get this project out of the ground and built.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jerine Ahmed. I'm with San Bernardino Edison. I'm a senior engineer and a technology area lead in the emerging products team, looking at whole buildings, which Mary's Village is one of the buildings that we're working on.
So just to set the stage a little bit, I want you all to imagine what the perfect home could be. You know, imagine that it's the perfect temperature all year round, that it's well insulated, that it's clean, there's no indoor air pollution, has modern appliances, that the house practically pays for itself because of the energy that it generates on site takes care of the energy that it consumes. This is really what the promise is of zero net energy homes, and we're going to spend the next half hour talking about those technologies, what the promise of those technologies, and how we can use zero net energies to build clean solutions to solve the housing shortage and crisis that we heard so much about already today. And what I hope you take away is that these technologies are real now, and it's not just something that is potentially only for a very small portion of the population, but that it can even provide solutions for the project that we're so excited to share with you, which is transitional housing for homeless men right nearby here with Mary's Village. Mary's Village has been a great partnership between my organization, Southern California Edison, also Crestwood Communities, Homemade Inland Empire. You're going to hear more about what we're doing there in that project and the potential of this technology. SCE, we donated over $200,000 to help the project move forward, and there's a great workforce training component as well, which we heard a lot about in the last panel. It's an opportunity here with an all-electric project. The construction is going to be less because we're not extending the gas lines. It's going to be part of what is a cleaner and greener electric grid, moving towards the solutions that we're all actively pursuing to fight climate change. But I think that what is really exciting about this project is that it ties together so many of the themes that are near and dear to all of your hearts. And also, it's an opportunity, I think, for inspiration. For us to be inspired by the promise of new technology, and that's why we've brought it here today as a subject that we want to hear from all of you about and talk to you about, because we need your help in the building community to make more projects like this a reality. So with that, I want to start out and talk with Terry about some of the benefits and challenges that he's seen on the ground making one of these zero net energy developments a reality.
Thank you. Well, the first was the getting it through to my staff that this was going to happen. Of course, zero net energy is a new concept, but it's coming. It's here. It's a fact of life. We've been blessed in that we've had this project to work with Southern California Edison to really get educated on it, which is big for a company of my size, which is a family-owned business, that we don't have the dollars to, the further the education. So Edison has been just a tremendous help. From the project standpoint, when I first walked in with my guys, they said, well, you're going to be $10 to $15 a square foot to make this happen. You've killed everything. It's not going to happen. What we're finding is it's not. It's less than $5 a foot, and when you offset what you replaced it with, it's even less than that. Take away the fact that you're paying for all these utilities, and you're going to make all that money back in less than 10 years. So, which is huge for Mary's Village, because we can put those dollars back into helping the men that are going to live in this facility, this transitional housing. So it's been a real win for them. To the nuts and bolts of it, my guys have found it has not been that difficult. The industry is coming to it. So at first they thought, how do you provide hot water to a 7,200 square foot building with an electric water heater? Thought it was never going to happen. It turns out it's not that big of a deal. We're finding that the industry has come to California standards and are producing products that will work inside these buildings. So it actually has not been as tough as we thought it would be, and I think we're going to have a very good project at the end of the day.
So could you give us a few more statistics about like how many people we expect to benefit from that? You said it's 7,200 square feet.
Well, what we have, Mary's Village is actually a 10-acre site. Phase 1, it's owned by Mary's Mercy Center, Inc., which is a nonprofit in San Bernardino that currently has 110-bed women and children's shelter, serves 90,000 meals a year, nutritional soup kitchens. This is a part of the population that was not served, which is men in San Bernardino. There was a lot of overnight facilities. Walk in, we'll give you a bed, we'll feed you, we'll put you back on the street, figure out what to do for the next 18 hours and come back, we'll put you back to bed. Which is great, that works, but what our Mary's Village is a long-term transitional. It's a 2-year program. These guys will come in, they'll get educated. If they don't have their GEDs, we'll get them their GEDs, we'll get them into job training. It's a 2-year process. That's our phase 1, which is 3 buildings, and they're all about 7,200 square feet. So we're pushing 24,000 square feet altogether up there, or more. And then from there, they go to our phase 2, which is actual housing, where we will provide them with duplexes for the men to live in for about a year to transition out. It's about, from start to finish, it's a 2 to 3 year process for these gentlemen to get back into society. Our whole theory is a hand up, not a handout. And so that's the ultimate goal. We just dug footings yesterday, and we plan to put gentlemen in these buildings about 8 months from now.
That's so exciting. Thank you so much. Ian, you promised us to geek out a little bit on the studies and technologies, so why don't you share from us what were some of the analysis that was done going into the designs to determine what was going to be used?
Absolutely, thanks. Like I said, I'm a building energy simulator, so what that means is I build a computer simulation of your house on a computer, and then I ask it what kind of energy it's going to use on an hour-to-hour basis. This allows the potential clients to understand from the beginning what exactly they're getting themselves into. It takes all the mystery out. As much as some of the earlier panelists were saying people are sensitive to $1,000 or $2,000 or $10,000, this is how we control things like that. This is how we can tell you, yes, you can have a zero energy home, or how you can produce as much energy as you consume, and know how much it's going to cost, and it doesn't become just some sort of gamble. So that's basically the initial, I mean, that's a general summary of what we do going in. I can get really into the nuts and bolts of floor plans and what exactly we would recommend for the HVAC. But I think in general, what we generally try to do is just make sure that you know what we're doing going in, so that the all-electric home or the mixed fuel home that you choose to use is exactly what you ask for.
So Jerine, why don't you tell us what the outcome was? So what were the technologies that were selected, and what are some of the benefits?
Sure. I like the theme of the conference, affordability, predictability. So, like I said, I work in the emerging products team. We look at new technologies that we can assess, we can bring it to the market, and also help users, customers, with these new technologies that can provide savings and also be predictable in the nature of their savings. So, at Mary's Village, we looked at, we had multiple discussions with the team to find out what is the right product that will apply to them. Because when people talk about emerging technologies, people get sometimes concerned. Is it new? But these are technologies that are in the market, but it needs a little bit of help to push it into the market. So, and we look at it from a demonstration perspective, as well as how can we evaluate it over a year's time and see what the results are going to be. How does it match with what Ian's model predicted, and how can we be close to that and provide that feedback? So some of the technologies that we looked at, and when I look at buildings, I look at it as a system. It needs to be harmonized, it needs to be synchronized, it needs to perform and sing a tune. You know? So in this case, it's zero net energy. So we looked at it from what is the standard construction practices that is in Crestwood's construction practices, and then looked at what we can build up on. And so we looked at making it more, I would say, looking at the envelope of the building to make sure it's well insulated. We looked at the attic. We made sure it has an unvented attic which is insulated to make it a tight building so there's no losses. A lot of the losses happen through the attics if you don't have proper insulation. We looked at the equipment. How can we use the equipment in the most efficient manner? HPC, air conditioning and heating, that consumes a lot of energy. So we looked at a product that could support that. And they're looking at a system which is called a variable speed system, which can, if the loads are high and then the system can ramp up to provide that cooling. And if there's not enough usage, it'll ramp down, and so you don't waste that energy that you'll find with a constant speed system. We also looked at the water heating. In Southern California, a lot of the water heating is with natural gas. So we looked at a new technology called heat pump water heater technology, which is fairly new in Southern California, but it's utilized in other parts of the country, other parts of the world. So that is what's going to be also installed out there. We looked at the cooking. Is it going to be electric cooking, or is it going to be something like induction cooking, which is more efficient than electric? It's about 70 to 20% more efficient than electric ranges. We also looked at clothes drying. So there's a technology called heat pump dryers that does not require venting. It's a ventless system, and so that also saves on the construction costs too. Installation costs are lower. So those are a few things that we looked at. But like I said, we looked at it as a system. We could have even looked at even more efficient kind of systems, but we looked at what is going to be managed by the customer to make sure that they have the ability to manage it, and looking at also the category of the building.
So maybe whether Ian or Jerine, you could talk about some of the cost implications. Terry shared some numbers already about how the cost implicated in the payback was for his project, but what have you seen if you're looking at this from a residential development standpoint?
Do you have some comments, Jerine?
So I can talk about maybe what we have done with zero net energy buildings. This is not a typical single family building, but in the number of years that we have worked with zero net energy homes, we have seen the cost come down. The incremental cost has come down over 50% in one of the first projects that I have done, maybe 5 or 6 years back, to a more recent project. So there has been a lower trend, and as the standards have also gone up, the incremental costs have gone down.
Yeah, and also not just the incremental cost of the first cost of the devices. That's really important. We want to know what the increase is, but also, like Terry mentioned, when you have these really efficient houses, the maintenance changes and also the daily operation costs. So really, I think that's where a lot of the sort of inventive savings comes in. I think we can all understand that installing less expensive equipment will save you money, but sometimes some of these equipment will keep your house just as comfortable as another device, but cost less. For example, some of the houses that we've built have operated, and this is looking at utility bills. This isn't just my super nerdy building energy simulation devices. We're looking at like $1 a day, and I'm talking here in the Inland Empire, big houses. I don't really want to name any names, but you would recognize the builder. They're great houses, and that's the kind of efficiency, I think, and the sort of savings that I think people are really going to be focused on when they see, a $29, $30, $31 bill at the end of the day, or excuse me, at the end of their billing cycle for their utility bill. And they're an all-electric house, so that's the only bill they get, right? So I think that's where the major savings is going to come in, and where you're really going to see the payback is going to come in.
Terry, could you talk a little bit about what the motivations were for going Z&E in this project? We've heard about some of the benefits and the technology, but at the end of the day, what was it that drove that decision?
Well, it was kind of twofold. From the charitable standpoint, it's going to save them dollars that they can put back into their programs and provide more educational programs to their gentlemen that are going through this. So from that point, it was an economic side of it. From my standpoint as a home builder, it was a great opportunity to learn this technology that is coming, and it's a fact of life. It's going to happen in the next couple of years in our industry, whether we like it or not. But as I've gone through this process in the last 2 years, it's not as painful as it sounds. What we're finding a lot of it is what I call not the sexy part of building. It's in the attic. You're never going to touch it the rest of the lifetime. It's there. It's built in. You can't get rid of it. So this technology is a lifelong for that building. That's going to make it efficient for a long time. So it's not as painful as we all thought it was going to be.
Those UVAs, right? Pretty good.
That's great. What about the residential experience, the experience of the homeowner, the person living in the home? Has that been a part of the analysis, maybe Ian, or any of the considerations, Jerine, when we think about our customers long term?
Well, this house in particular was not occupied when we developed it. It was a new construction, so we didn't have an opportunity to figure out what the behavioral characteristics of the occupants would be. So we used this is where building energy simulation comes in. We have 20 or 30 years of climate data that we use. We have the Building America and other teams have built huge databases about what we expect the miscellaneous electrical loads, miscellaneous gas loads. That's like, when you plug in your phone charger, right? This is not a load that we can really calibrate, like how much do you charge your phone, how many times do you use your toaster oven, stuff like that. Those are what we call miscellaneous electrical loads. So I promised you I'd get nerdy here somewhere. So basically, that's not something that we can account for unless it's an occupied building. So unless some of the other panelists have done some monitoring.
We haven't necessarily done hard science on it, but we do, and when I say we, I mean Mary's Mercy Center. We operate a 15,000 square foot women and children shelter that is, I think that one's 80 beds. And we're running electric bills in the summertime of $5,000 a month. And when you take the hard facts that Ian's provided on this, and we can recoup that by making some investments on the front end and not have that $5,000 bill to Edison, sorry Edison, but if I can knock out that $5,000 and put it towards educating the girls this month with some kind of program, it's better. And so with the men, that's what we're going to be able to do by making this investment up front. We're blessed that Edison has taken on a huge chunk of that investment. It's a test case for all of us because it's a building that, I forget the contract, but like 5 years you guys are going to study this building to see how these technologies are doing, and which is great, and it's going to help us to understand it as well. So in the end of the day, it's going to be a great win for the program.
So I mentioned earlier that we're going to be providing monitoring. So we'll be looking at most of the end users, and that's going to be under two feedback mechanism for the operator to find out what's being utilized where and when, and also if the residents have any questions or challenges, I think that can be addressed too. So, but again, I think the monitoring will provide us feedback.
Terry, you mentioned a couple times that you see that this is the direction that it's going. We're going to be going zero net energy, going clean building. And we know that in the new energy code that by January 2020, all new homes that are built in California are starting to move towards zero net energy, with the requirement of solar panels and other technologies. Any other thoughts about how energy code plays a role here, or the code that's changing next year?
My industry is driven by lobbyists who put this stuff into effect, and it's going to be part of my life whether I like it or not. And I'm just blessed to be able to go through this process with Edison, to understand it better, to do it more efficiently, and to get them on board, to tell them what's the pain for me and how they can jockey and jive around it. So it's been a great process for us. And like I say, 2 years ago, my guys threw me out of the office, so we're not doing this. You've lost your mind, we're not doing this. Today, they're on board and they're seeing the value in this. So I think as the industry grows with this and accepts it, we'll be okay.
Jerine, any thoughts about code and the opportunities there?
I think it's a learning process, and what we do in our emerging technologies programs, the outcomes are fed into, whether it goes into rulemaking in the codes, or even programs, right? We can look at different kinds of incentives to help overcome some of those barriers in the interim until it becomes a code. But the results and the studies that we do will definitely feed into improvement of the code.
So I'm going to open it up for audience questions. So start thinking about your questions. I just have one more for the panelists to think about here. We heard Phil on the last panel talk about how innovation in home building is at a glacial pace. And I thought that was a very interesting intro into what we've been talking about here. What do you think we can do, or are you seeing that we're still at a glacial pace, or are we starting to be able to accelerate towards clean home building?
Before I blow things up, do you guys want to be nice about it?
Well, they always say us contractors aren't real smart. If
That's
we
not
were, we
true.
wouldn't be in the construction business. My family, we're since 1940s on, so we're real slow. It's just, we get set in our ways, and it's just educating them. And I keep going back to this, but this Edison process in the past 2 years has been great. I didn't know that you guys have an entire educational facility in Irwindale, where I took all my subcontractors to about 3-4 months ago and educated them on this stuff. And so it's just stopping, nailing 2x4s together and learning the process. And so Edison has been great about doing that with us. Reaching out to Karen and her team has been a huge help, especially for myself, who's we build 100 houses a year. We're a mom and pop's operation compared to, the big guys. But it's Edison's there to help us, and it's not as painful as we thought, as I said.
Yeah, I think the real thing that I'm trying to say is, and I appreciate all that, it's really just adoption. Like it's not that the technologies that we need to solve these problems don't exist. And oftentimes it's not that the problems or the technologies that we think can solve the problems are unavailable or too expensive or something like that. It's simply adoption. People don't know how to use the new stuff. And there's systematic problems to that. Like the previous panel was talking about, there's a loss of workers. We don't have enough workers to build the houses that we want to build already, so we need to somehow educate the people that we already have and then build faster. And it really becomes a problem of attrition. It's really that it's like Phil said, things do move at a glacial pace, but it's not because the technologies and the solutions aren't there. It's because people are having problems adopting them. It's down to people like me start sounding like really nerds when some of these technologies have been around for 30 or 40 years. Without going into too many specifics, I really think that it's not that these are the homes of the future, these are actually the homes of the past, and we're just trying to catch up.
Jerine?
Yeah, so I look at it as an influence, how can we influence the adoption of these new technologies? We shorten the time frame by doing projects like this, and where we are sharing the information with an audience that's very receptive. So we shorten the time frame, so it's a quicker adoption process.
So why don't we hear some questions from the audience? We've got one right here at the front table. Microphone is coming.
About to run the microphone out.
Oh, do you need a microphone?
One left.
Here, we'll share.
That's okay, we're going back.
Here's one.
Let's go to our first question. Where were we at here? Oh.
Yep, table 16.
Those of us who've been installing solar panels as a standard feature on homes for quite a while, the new building protocol relative to rates and what are not peak hours has taken a lot of what were formerly good economics in solar panels, and now that they're being required, the way our buyers and consumers are being charged relative to peak hours and other things has taken a lot of the economics right out of solar panels at a time they're being forced on us. Why is that?
I can certainly answer that question. So what we're talking about here is that the time of use peak period, so the energy is different prices throughout the day, that those peak periods are changing, and now it's from 4 to 9 p.m. is the most expensive time of day. And the reason there's a negative impact on a solar economics is because that's just the time when the solar starts to fade out and you are back on the grid using grid energy, and that's the most expensive. So for customers who previously, when the peak period was in the middle of the day, we're seeing the majority of their most expensive usage offset by solar. For customers going forward, that won't be the case anymore. The reason for that is because the energy is now most expensive and it's dirtiest from 4 to 9. And so we align at the utility at SCE, all the utilities across the state, we align the cost of the energy consumed with how dirty and how expensive the energy is on the grid at that time. Because we want to incentivize people to use energy when it's the cleanest. And it used to be different hours, but now because of solar, it's the cleanest and the cheapest right in the middle of the day. So what we're seeing, because we are continuing to support and we are advancing renewable energy across the grid, what we're seeing customers do is pair solar with storage. And so when battery storage is paired with solar, then the economics become positive again. And in fact, at SCE, we still have a lot of incentives to help buy down the cost of storage. And the customers, then there's additional benefits. We're seeing more customers interested in the resiliency value, where they can install solar and storage and therefore be able to supply a portion of their load even if the grid is out. So what we've seen is a significant growth. We have almost 4,000 customers now with solar and storage paired behind the meter. That we expect is going to double every year for the next 10 years. So I think that we're going to see even more push for battery storage, and that will, in the end, the rates will be achieving what we want them to achieve, which is for people to not be using as much energy when it is the dirtiest, from 4 to 9.
I'm going to make a totally sidebar comment on that. Excellent point, by the way, that my dad's been building zero energy homes about as long as anyone, and that's the main topic of conversation at my table is what's happening to the value of my solar panels that we invested in many years ago. But like I was saying earlier, there's lots of new tech. I'm very pro solar, but there are lots of technologies. There's fuel cells. There's lots of things that we can do when solar becomes not the saving grace that we thought it was. I mean, certainly it still has lots of applications, but there's places like high-rise buildings. Like, how are you going to put enough solar panels on a skyscraper in order to make it produce as much energy as it consumes? It's not possible. So there are other technologies we can use, like fuel cells. You could have an all-electric skyscraper that you're powering with a fuel cell, and it's still going to be producing less. It's going to be cleaner than grid energy. So there's a lot of alternatives to what's going on with solar right now.
Other questions?
We take requests. We can put on a dance if you like.
So there's a question right there. 26.
Yes, thank you for your presentation. Yes, how are you, Southern California Edison, working with the state's SOMA program for bringing solar to low-income multifamily projects?
Sure. So SOMA is Solar on Multi-Family Affordable Housing. That's what the acronym stands for. It's a $1 billion program over 10 years, $100 million a year spread across the state to provide incentives for new construction, multifamily that will include solar. In SCE service territory alone, that's nearly $50 million a year that we will be using to support solar. So we are working with a consortium that is advancing that program across the state, led by Grid Alternatives and a few other partners. It's expected to launch next month, and we expect that we're going to get a lot of interest from the building community because the incentives are quite attractive in order to help be sure that we're putting solar out in parts of the community that so far haven't benefited. We will be marketing other technologies like storage with the solar and also electric vehicle charging and others so that we can make sure that those economics are positive for the customer in the long run. Great. No other questions? So thank you so much. I think we're going to move on to the next section of the day.
Let's give our panel another round of applause. So at the introduction of today's conference, I alluded to the governor and the legislature's action on the budget and the trailer bill on carrots and sticks, and we'll have a chance to talk a little bit about that in our next two panels. I'm really excited about this next panel here as well, and as we look at all the cities crunching the numbers and looking at their regional housing needs assessment, RENA numbers, and that